Okay, I guess we can get started now. My name is Michael Bradford, and I would like to thank you all for attending ICR's 37th Annual Spiritual Conference. And before we get started, I would just like to say a few words about ICR, a little bit about our history and our goals. So, as you can see from the title, our 37th Annual Conference, we've been doing this for a long time. And in fact, many of us at ICR go back to the mid-1970s. And in August of 1977, a large group of Canadians flew to Kashmir, India, to attend a series of discourses that was being given by Gopi Krishna. Now, as a consequence of what we learned in those discourses, some of us decided that the message that he was trying to bring to the world was so important that we wanted to devote all of our spare time and energy to helping him with this message. So what is this message? Why is it so important? Well, what Gopi Krishna wanted was that the phenomenon of spiritual transformation be investigated by science in order to verify that it was, as he believed, a consequence of physiological changes in the brain and nervous system of an individual. Now, convincing the orthodox scientific community of the reality of spiritual experience is, as you can well imagine, not a simple or easy task. For the most part, orthodox science believes that spiritual experience is at best just a curious mental state of some kind, and at worst, a pathology or even a transient psychosis. But what Gopi Krishna discovered, or he would probably prefer to put it, was revealed to him, put the subject of spiritual transformation into a context that science most definitely does believe in. And that context is evolution. And what he said was that cosmic consciousness or enlightenment is actually a new faculty of perception evolving in the human brain, as distinct from and as advanced from the intellect as the intellect is from instinctive animal consciousness. He also said that the founders of the great faiths of mankind and the enlightened sages and seers of the past were in fact more or less fully formed examples of this new faculty of perception. And that what this faculty of perception is the ability of an individual to apprehend reality directly in its ultimate form as pure consciousness or intelligence. So what justification is there for this view that spiritual transformation is an evolutionary process? In order to put it into perspective, I would just like to make two statements of fact about evolution. Now, the first statement is that ever since life began to evolve on Earth, something like 4 billion years ago, it has tended to proceed over long spans of time, in general, from life forms of lower order complexity to those of higher order complexity with more evolved brains, nervous systems, and faculties of perception. So 4 billion years ago, we see only single-celled organisms. These somehow evolved into multi-celled organisms and then eventually into complex life in the oceans. This spread to the land, and then we see the evolution of reptiles and amphibians, then dinosaurs, then mammals, then primates, then hominids, and finally Homo sapiens with our powerful intellect. Now, the interesting thing about this trend in evolution is that science has no explanation for it. If we look at the traditional orthodox scientific view of evolution, which is called the neo-Darwinian theory, it says that evolution happens as a consequence of totally random genetic mutations put through the filter of natural selection. So the only direction that evolution should be taking, according to this theory, is that life forms become more and more viable. However, if we look at the fossil record, we see this is not the case. Some of the more simpler forms of life, like sharks and turtles, have been around for hundreds of millions of years. And yet mankind, with our huge intellect, and given our proclivity for developing nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons of mass destruction, in addition to our behavior, which is destroying the very environment that we live in, will be likely to live for another 100 years, let alone 100 million years. So the only explanation possible for this conundrum is that there is some factor involved in the influencing the course of evolution, which science is totally unaware of at present. Now, the second fact about evolution that I'm going to make is that the more advanced the life form, the more advanced the faculties of sense and mind that it possesses, the more of reality that it apprehends. So I think we can safely say that a microbe or bacteria apprehends very little of the whole of reality, whereas an earthworm, say, apprehends much more of reality than does a microbe. And a species like a bird or a fish or a chimpanzee apprehend much more than an earthworm. And this is due to the faculties of sense that each species possesses. Now, in the case of chimpanzees and humans, it is a little bit different because we have, of course, the same 5 faculties of sense that a chimpanzee has. What is different is our highly evolved intellect, faculty of mind. And if you take anything away from what I'm saying today, it is what I'm going to say next. And it is that this faculty of intellect that we possess has given us access to aspects of creation that are totally hidden from all other life on Earth. And I'm talking about aspects of creation like mathematics, like the laws of nature, the physical forces, the periodic table of elements, the scale of the universe on the microscopic and macroscopic level, the quantum world. All these things, they're aspects of creation which are totally hidden from all other species of life on Earth, at least as far as we know. And I think it would also be safe to say that these abilities, or this ability that we have to apprehend aspects of creation, are a consequence of physiological changes in our brain and nervous system, either structural or biochemical, that give us this ability. Now, if we combine these 2 facts about evolution, this inexorable rise from simple to complex, with more and more advanced brains and nervous systems and faculties of perception, with the fact that with each step in this evolutionary ladder, more and more aspects of creation are revealed, then the inference is clear that the possibility that further faculties of mind evolving in a human being are not only possible, but maybe even probable. What Gopi Krishna said, and this is why his message is so important, is that this process of evolutionary transformation is proceeding according to strict natural laws, and that the behavior of the human species, our general lifestyles, has a very powerful influence on this process, for either in a positive or a negative way. And unfortunately, for much of the history of mankind, this evolution has been impeded or obstructed by our lifestyles. And if we look at the state of the world today, he said that many of the ills of society we see right now, the mental ills, things like widespread drug abuse and addiction, interpersonal violence, crime, wars, many types of mental illness such as anxiety, depression. He said many of these things, including, by the way, wars, revolutions, and even extreme fundamentalist violence, are a direct consequence of obstruction to our evolution by our immoderate lifestyles. But what he also said was that if we remove these obstructions, which we can do by adherence to the lifestyle guidelines that have been given to us by the founders of the great faiths, that eventually this faculty of cosmic consciousness or enlightenment will become a permanent feature of every member of the species, in the same way that the intellect has become a permanent feature for all of us. And he said, when this happens, mankind will enter a glorious future that we cannot even begin to imagine at present. So with those words, I will now turn things over to Ted Wood to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for that good introduction. And also should mention, for those of you who don't know Mike, he worked with Gopi Krishna for 6 years in India, and he's also the author of the book Consciousness, the New Paradigm, and has been a founding member of ICR and currently is on his board, in our board as well.